Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. So let's start with uh, we'll read a message and then get into God Speaks. So, Mamaji, are you in a position to read the couplets?
Yes, yes, sure.
Sure, go ahead.
Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. Three of Meher Baba's favorite couplets of Hafiz, the mystical Persian poet, befitting a fortunate slave, carry out every command of the master without any question of why and what. About what you hear from the master, never say it is wrong, because, my dear, the fault lies in your own incapacity to understand him. I am slave of the master who has released me from ignorance. Whatever my master does is of the highest benefit to all concerned. Hafiz, Avatar Meher Baba ki jai.
Thank you so much, and welcome back, everybody, to what we are doing with God Speaks and Beams together. So, we have finished 7 sessions. We are in part three of the book, right? And I'm sorry, I think I missed out on doing something which I planned for, and I don't know when to do it and how to do it, given where we are. And I discovered it just now. So let me go back to what we started. So if you remember this interface, we started this program by trying to use, we started this reading by trying to jointly approach God Speaks in Beams and study it together, and also try to use artificial intelligence to make our journey and our study program more tighter. There was a quiz that was possible after every section. So, what are the thoughts? Maybe we do it offline. I send the quiz questions out and then we just do it. So, it's not a measure of testing or comparative performance. It's just a personal way of checking how well we are doing and also answering these questions. So, can you see my screen? So, you'll actually see the questions here. So, for every section, there is a set of questions with answers, and I can put it up online and then we can just see it. What do you think? What's the way you want to handle this? Comma
I think you should post it.
on the
It
group and then
will make the
everybody can
learning
just
rather
do
than
the.
a discussion. Yeah, otherwise
Yeah,
we
I agree.
spend discussing this.
I think at least for part one and part two, let me put it up online and
Yeah,
let's see how it goes. And if I think the other way of looking at it, Sanjay, is actually doing the questions online so that we can also discuss it. Because if we do it like a test, or I mean, if you do it completely just as a cloud checkbox and you just check it, you may not be able to discuss it immediately because everybody may do it at different times. But anyway,
yeah.
let's figure it out. So now, other than that, we are also recommended. I mean, what happens is there is a page part-based cross-reference I'm using from this. So for part two, which is what we have completed, we can read the advancing life stream and the Vim from the Beyond. Vim from the Beyond we finished already. So let's go back and see it in Beams. So we are reading Advancing Life Streams from page 20 as it is linked to part two. Part two was about the kingdoms and the journey through the kingdoms. So, okay, read for some time. Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. The Advancing Life Stream. The onward march of evolving consciousness from one species to another proceeds step by step and very rarely by leaps. But the diverse steps in onward evolution must not be rigidly construed. If a particular species is extinct, its spiritual purpose can be served by some other kindred species or by added births in some complementary species or by deficient and partial expressions through a slightly higher species. In short, evolution takes advantage of innumerable alternatives available to it. It can never be frustrated by minor gaps constituted by extinct species or missing links. I'll pause here. So, this paragraph seems to suggest one of the questions that pop up in the mind when we think of evolution and evolution from a Baba perspective. So, what about species that are extinct? What about species? Are there new species going to be generated? And so on and so forth. So, Baba gives a scientific explanation for this in this paragraph. And the other thing that I wanted to convey is this is also the title, Advancing Lifestream is also the title of a book written by Baba. I'm sure, a booklet, I should say. Yeah. So, continuing. Even if the kangaroos, whooping cranes, or any other species of plants or animals become extinct, it will neither arrest nor hamper the advancing life stream, nor will it frustrate the real purpose of evolution, which is to arrive at full consciousness. Even if there were 100 missing links, the advancing life stream can either forge new suitable species or make use of existing species. However, an interesting fact which needs special mention is that at the transition from one species to another species, there is for every such transition a subspecies or a form which is double faced. It can, as it were, not only look in two opposite directions, but also move in two opposite directions. With equal facility, it can retain its contact both with the species from which it is disengaging and with the new species into which it is becoming molded. This intermediate form has to be able to move backwards and forwards. It is absolutely necessary for transitions from one species into another. Some species help and others hamper the forward movement of the advancing life stream. For example, weeds retard the development of higher forms of vegetables and plants. Their part in the vegetative life is comparable to that of primitive races in the civilized world. But their function is not merely negative. By competing with higher forms of vegetation, they invite in such higher forms a greater power for struggle for existence. Yet the spiritual status of a species is not always to be determined by its usefulness to some other species. The stinging nettle is not necessarily lower in evolution just because it stings the men who touch it. To think so would be to take a purely anthropocentric view of creation. To view things in their right perspective, we have to see all forms, including human forms, as evolved for the fulfillment of the one eternal divine life. On the previous paragraph here, the species between two complex life forms, right? If you see this uh, species which is double faced, there is also a term that's used for this, correct? I saw it, I heard it first from in the Baba world. I'm struggling to remember the name of this, but there's basically uh, a, 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 a species of this type between every kingdom. So when you go from mineral to from worm to bird to animal, you actually have one species from this type. So I'm trying to remember the name. I don't know, unfortunately. If anybody else remembers, it'll be good. Okay. Nobody remembers. It's okay. In its creative self-fulfillment, the advancing life stream can and does forge new species such as natural or artificial hybrids in vegetable or animal kingdoms. Even man-made hybrids in plants or animals can become a medium for gathering fresh experiences in the ascending scale of evolution. But it is not compulsory for every soul to go through these hybrid forms. It is open to the soul to gather these experiences through the parent species from which the hybrids have sprung into existence. However, evolution is sometimes expedited through hybrid forms, and this would be applicable to the products of interracial marriages. The advancing life stream creates numerous forms, but no form should be regarded as a cage, restricting and canalizing the gathering of experiences in a manner that would exclude intercommunion with other forms of the same species or even with the forms of other species. Human beings communicate with each other and evolve together by an interchange of experiences. In the same way, intercommunication of some type is an important factor even in the world of plants and animals. Exchange of experiences and evolving together are not necessarily conditioned by the use of spoken or written language, which facilitates profiting by each other's experiences. Men can understand each other through spoken or written language and get an opportunity of sharing life with others. But animals also share life together despite the absence of such language. Even animals and plants have a language of their own, a mode of partial or rudimentary communication. They share life with other forms and advance together. In fact, all forms and species live in a common world. They not only share life with forms of their own species, but also with forms of other species. Thus, birds, beasts, plants, and human beings, and all that lives and breathes, make their contributions to the unfolding life of each. The unfoldment of the divine in life is a common enterprise and not an exclusive achievement. Even the evolution of angels and archangels, with of their hierarchy, is not to be regarded as an exclusive stream in advancing life. They can incarnate among the human beings and become linked up with the human stream of life. They are also subject to the laws of cycles, and all that happens to them is subject to the control of the perfect masters. In the subhuman creation, reincarnation of evolved consciousness takes place through the subtle matrix, from which, at a later stage, a fully formed subtle body develops. Plants and animals do not have a fully developed subtle body, but the rudimentary subtle matrix gradually takes shape according to the stage of development achieved. This subtle matrix is the vehicle for the transmigration of subhuman consciousness from one species into another. It is also the medium in which the subhuman creatures live in the astral before taking a new gross form. So, why is the word matrix used here? Subtle matrix. Anybody has a thought or a comment?
I think it is the interconnectivity of all the forms. So that is why this word is coming. Because bird form is connected with animal, the vegetable form because they eat and they interact with each other. Likewise. That's why there is a
Possible.
matrix.
Possible, yeah. And that somehow changes with the
And it is,
final stage of the human form where it becomes
yeah,
a subtle body.
yeah.
Okay.
So that matrix is for the transmigration of the subconsciousness. That's what is written here.
Yeah, I continue. As a general
The,
rule, the
and
life stream.
the last sentence in
Yeah,
the paragraph is also quite revealing. It is also the medium in which the subhuman creatures live in the astral before taking a new gross form. So they too have the astral cycle.
yes. No, but I think that was referred to also in God Speaks, right? So the words used were different, but there was the Baba said there was a pause. There was a pause between each uh, form and experience, and then after that pause, you go back. So that could be the reference to the astral.
Yes, possible. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Let's continue then. As a general rule, the life stream advances through opposites. For example, those men who have once appeared with mental brilliance in the gross world are sometimes devoid of that mental brilliance in a subsequent incarnation. Of course, the capacities of mental brilliance which they have once acquired are retained in the mental body and are in no way destroyed. But the intrinsic logic of the spiritual advancement of the soul may entail for it a period in which these capacities of mental brilliance are not accessible to it. The opposites of experience are equally necessary for the full unfoldment of spiritual understanding. So the opposites are treated very well in discourses, in God to man and man to God. That's the cross reference provided here. Once a soul acquires the human form, the general rule is an onward march through human incarnations only. Retrograde incarnation is extremely rare in the advancing self fulfillment of the life stream. If sometimes results from flagrant misuse of occult powers. Sorry, let me read that again. Let me read the whole paragraph again. Once a soul acquires the human form, the general rule is an onward march through human incarnations only. Retrograde incarnation is extremely rare in the advancing self fulfillment of the life stream. It sometimes results from flagrant misuse of occult powers. Retrograde incarnation is not a general rule, but an extremely rare exception. Continuation of the human form without revision to any subhuman form is the normal occurrence. Even for gross violation of moral laws, a corrective is provided by the same soul having to go through the opposite of what he has done or experienced. For example, a person who murders another for lust might himself be murdered for lust, either in the same incarnation or in the next, and thus realize the nefariousness of his heinous crime. The reference in this paragraph is probably to the fourth planar and the use of his occult powers, which bring him back, right? Continuing. However, retrograde incarnation can take place in those exceptional circumstances where occult powers are used for the perpetration of heinous crimes. A soul which is invested with occult powers due to his station on a higher plane is expected to have them under control. But if he grossly misuses them to being a victim of his lower desires or ego projects, he invites upon himself the drastic penalty of having to revert back to the subhuman form and recommence his evolution from that point. This sort of thing can happen on the fourth plane unless there is a timely intervention by some higher being. But retrogression of this type is very unusual. The forward march of the advancing life stream brings with it an increasing ascent towards the peak of realized truth and an increasingly greater unfoldment of inner divinity. So that's the supporting language or chapter that's corresponding to two. Okay, so let's just mark out the fact that we finished reading one and three here so that we at least know what's going on. I can just do it quickly. Any comments on what we read now?
If we do some calculation, right? If we do some
Yeah.
calculation from millions of years,
Uh-huh.
so the population of humans is increased, but up to certain extent, right? Then animals are also coming. It's still the animals are there, different kingdoms are there. So
Okay.
if we do the calculation from millions of years, so if we
Hmm.
see, yeah, human forms, human population is increased up to maybe we can say up to certain percent. Can we say
Okay.
every 100 or 200 years, the moksha also means like maybe village people are getting the moksha also, because if you do the calculation of population, I know there are multi-universe, multiple universes are there. I don't know if some humans are going from Earth to somewhere else, but if we do the mathematical calculation from suppose for the past 1,000 years or 2,000 years, 5,000, so the population of animals, population of humans, it's up to certain proportion is increasing, right? But still the new animals are coming, new maybe they are coming from different sources. And humans population is also up to certain, I mean, because the animals also become the human after certain duration, right? Animals will also become the humans. And human population is not increasing up to that level. So maybe we can say maybe certain percentage of people are getting the moksha also in 100 years or 200 years. Are you getting my point? What exactly I want to say?
I'm not sure. See,
Hmm.
one reality is I'm not sure I understand your question.
Okay.
Are you suggesting that the number of people, number
Yes.
of human beings is constantly going up? Is
Yeah, it's
so?
going up. Yes,
Okay.
correct.
And
Number
that's
of
because the number of souls that are using Earth as a vehicle to uh, get to realization is going up.
correct,
And I think Baba's
correct,
also
correct.
talked about that. So what's the question?
So question is, so maybe I can see like many souls are getting the moksha also in some at certain it's like maybe every 10 years, 15 years, or 100 years. Many souls are getting moksha also. That's why the human population is not increased up to that level. Like it's not like 100 people, 100% only humans are there. It's like my point is like, yeah, see, animals are here, right? Animal kingdom was there. Animal kingdom population has been reduced in
Okay.
last I would say 500 years, right? Animal kingdom has been reduced. Human population has been increased. So again, soul has to go to the all the forms of lives, right? All the animal form, all the still fishes are there, because that souls will also become the human at that point.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
until like those many souls become human, some humans has to go out of the universe, right? It's not like that. That is also one cycle. That is also one cycle. If if the some soul is becoming from animal kingdom to the human kingdom, right? So when that much years are going, so that soul also, that human soul also, that soul might be taking some billion of years or some years in the earth. But that is also one cycle. After certain years, I think that some number of souls of human, they are just going away. They are also maybe becoming the god, or they are going somewhere else. That's what I'm thinking. I don't know if it's clear or not, but whatever I'm saying. But my point is, after certain, there may be whatever calculation I feel, some human souls are also they are getting the moksha after, and that's not a very small count. That might be a very big count also. That's what I think. If we
Okay.
do
I
some
I'll
mathematical
give you
calculation,
my personal assessment. I think I understand what you're trying to say. My personal
yeah,
reaction, and then we'll get others to react as well. I feel that I think the numbers are stacked against. I mean, it's a long and arduous journey. Okay, it's not easy, even for the human. Having said that, I believe that we are seeing the greatest push in terms of volumes of people getting, I mean, numbers of people getting into human form and using the earth as a vehicle for getting towards their God realization journey. On the animal question, on the animals' numbers going down overall, I don't know. There is obviously some sort of extinction and some sort of damage that human life has caused to human life and development, and all the environmental damage has caused some damage to the numbers overall. But I don't think that's significant because there are new species formed, and then there's newer vegetation happening everywhere. And I don't think the overall numbers are skewed. I think that I only think that the numbers for humans and the numbers for Earth have never looked better. But that doesn't mean our chances of God realization have improved. No, that still is the 84 lakh births, and you don't have any shortcuts, right? That's my assessment. If that kind of
Mhm.
gives some
Okay.
commentary or response to you. Anybody else?
Yeah, Baba, I think that what is need to be understood is that it has nothing to do with the animal form or plant form or whatever. The important thing to understand is the drop soul consciousness is going through evolution, reincarnation. So we are talking about the plant and animal evolution. So it doesn't matter, whether it comes down from 10 million species to 1 million species. The ultimate goal is when that particular form is dropped, the consciousness of the dropped soul needs to evolve. That is the point. It will take the appropriate form which will allow it to evolve consciousness. So that is how we have to look at it rather than trying to. I know because right now there's an environmental violence going on, a lot of forests and green, all the greenery is being destroyed and animals are being affected. But technically, we all know that nothing happens to the soul. So the consciousness of the soul will take all these different forms, keeps dropping, what we call as association and identification with the form. So it's just a process, just like we went from childhood to adulthood. Now, if you're 60 plus, you become a senior citizen. So it doesn't matter. Yeah, Baba.
I agree. Anybody else? Any comments for Ashish? What happened? One second. I'm sorry, my connection to the monitor failed. So figuring it out. Meanwhile, anybody wants to react to Ashish? Here's your chance. Okay. But I agree
Yeah,
with Kama, what Kama said as well. So
yeah, yeah.
that's a good closure. Do you think that's satisfactory, Ashish?
I really don't know. I don't know. My point was totally different actually. I was talking of the human population, which is not increasing up to the certain level. If the all the other kingdoms are coming to the human birth after certain time. So I was thinking there is
Okay.
some proportion. That's what it is actually.
Okay. So you're talking about the interrelationship between the forms. I don't think there is a
Yeah,
proportion, or I don't know. Yeah, that's a good
yeah.
good
I know.
question and a
I just I just get the
good
point.
thought
Mm,
process to pursue.
mm.
If there is a divine proportion to the whole thing. If there was, I think the logic suggests that it won't. It's not there because the way human population has increased. So if you look at the human population explosion, that's not proportional to other species and other forms. So it's not proportional, and which makes me believe that maybe it's not. But something to think about. Okay, so let's continue to part three then, if there are no more comments and if you're okay to get into the characteristics of the different domain kingdoms. Yeah. Okay. So let's get to part three, characteristics of the different kingdoms. And I think it should be page 28, those of you on the book, physical book. To achieve complete development of consciousness in the human form, the evolutionary process had to take seven major leaps, namely, from stone to metal, from metal to vegetable, from vegetable to worm, from worm to fish, from fish to bird, from bird to animal, and finally from animal to the human being, each possessing different characteristics. Characteristics of the kingdom of stones and the kingdom of metals. In the stone form and metal form, the soul has its initial experiences of the gross world. The kingdom of metals, like the kingdom of stones, is inorganic and solid. Both kingdoms include within their range a rich variety of species. In the solid states of stones and metals, life and energy are dormant. Therefore, they are regarded as inanimate. The stone forms and metal forms cannot move about by themselves. That is, they have no voluntary motion. For this reason, the consciousness which associates itself with these forms tends to assert itself through a recumbent horizontal position rather than through an erect position or vertical upright stand in the gross world. So let's go to our diagram. Right? Was it in the last one that I put the diagram? Yeah. So I had shared this as well earlier, and it's on the Trello card for anybody who wants to get it. So if you see this, this is the recumbent form, and uh, you go through the turns. So there are five turns, and from stone through human, the form takes five turns, right? So we'll keep this as a reference and keep coming back to it as we go through the kingdoms. Characteristics of the vegetable kingdom. In the vegetable kingdom, consciousness realizes itself as half animate and half inanimate. The increased consciousness of the vegetable form asserts its existence in the gross world through an upright or erect stand. The vegetable forms have to take the help of some other things such as earth or rock for maintaining an erect position. They can neither stand by themselves nor move voluntarily from place to place since they are rooted in some spot. Characteristics of the kingdom of worms. In worm consciousness, the soul gathers experiences of voluntary movement. It experiences itself as animate. In its travail to gain more and further consciousness, the worm conscious soul experiences itself in the gross world, first as an invertebrate and later as a vertebrate, and goes on creeping in diverse species of worms. Voluntary movements are made by crawling by means of pairs of legs, sometimes by multiple pairs of legs, and sometimes by pairs of legs and pairs of wings. Worms may have surfaces that are hairy, smooth, silky, rough, or scaly. The worm goes through a struggle for existence and survival and is endowed with sensation and life. Sometimes it is an amphibian, that is, it has not only voluntary movement on earth, but has also mobility in water. For the purpose of this explanation, The worm form includes all worms, insects, reptiles, and amphibia of their species. Even when they have legs and wings, they have a tendency to crawl, and they are distinct from birds and quadruped animals. The worm form is recumbent, has no upright or erect stand, and is prone to lie prostrate. So let's go and see what's going on here. So the vegetable, there is a turn, and the root is the head. So Baba says you're actually in the reverse position as a vegetable. The root and the brains of probably the vegetable, if you can take that analogy further, would be under the ground, and your legs are up in the air, right? So, and then you have the worm, which is completely recumbent again, but it's prostrate. It's recumbent and prostrate.
I,
Characteristics,
Karthik, I found
yes.
some interesting thing from the stone form to the vegetable as it
Mm-hmm,
develops. So, if you go back to the paragraph on the stone form,
mm-hmm,
uh, this um, in the solid state of stones and metals, life and energy are dormant. Life and energy are dormant.
correct.
Therefore, they are regarded as inanimate. So, if you come to the vegetable form,
Yes. Sorry, vegetable form. Yeah. It's half inanimate and half animate.
and the increased consciousness of the vegetable form asserts in existence of gross world through an operator, not this further down.
Okay. Okay.
Um, not this, just go up. They have life. That's what is referred to for the first time there. Uh,
Uh, no, that's referred to in worm.
Mom,
So
yes,
it,
yes, yes,
yeah,
yes,
it experiences itself as animate for the first time.
animate, and also,
Animate,
uh,
correct. And I think you're right. It also says life somewhere.
yes,
Endowed with sensation of life, sensation and
sensation
life.
is the first thing coming up here,
Correct.
so which was not there in the stone form. So, like this,
Correct.
there is a gradual
Progression.
progression. So, we need to make a note of this. Okay.
Very true. Very true. So first one is almost nothing. Then you get a sense of half animate, half inanimate. Then you have complete animate consciousness in the worm, and then you're endowed with sensation and life. And yeah, so the other thing is also this is the first kingdom where you directly go through and personally or individually experience the struggle for survival. A worm hides under a stone to save itself. I mean, one can argue that even plants are reacting to environment, but here it's more direct, right? So it's a matter of life and death. It's a matter of growth and no growth, and choices that the worm can make are more direct than a plant. The plant has very little control, right? So the sophistication in the choice making and in the reaction to environment increases as the forms go from one kingdom to another.
That is a gradual development of the consciousness, levels of consciousness.
Perfect.
Their
Perfect.
capability of say, reacting or responding to external circumstances or stimuli.
So should you say that's early stages of viveka, early stages of discrimination, early stages of decision.
This
So a
is
sunflower.
more of a recognition, more of an
Mhm.
experience, early stages. So whether they learn through this is very gradual, I hope. The only
So
thing
even
is
if it's
we are
mechanical,
seeing a
so
progress from the stone form to this one, because accepting a stone form as a soul is very difficult for us because we thought it is totally without life or
inanimate.
things like that. So Baba makes it uh, clear that there is a gradual process or a progress. So because of that, I thought these are the few steps which tries to connect with the development. So we would like to say, remember these things and gradually go to the higher forms and find what is the further development, what is the further development.
True. True, but I'll go back to my question. So can we say in an earlier conversation in one of our sessions in the last few weeks, we also agreed that the core aspect is environment or stimuli and response to that stimuli. And in fact, if you remember Beams, Baba also says that. He says that in the avatar section, where the only, I mean, the only two things that are required for God realization is attunement to your environment and inner poise. Those are the two things, right? So when you say attunement or adjustment, he uses the word adjustment. I'm sorry. Adjustment to the external universe. What is adjustment to the external universe for a stone? What is the adjustment to the external universe for a vegetable? I would say it's just reaction to environment, reaction to stimuli. A sunflower moves from the east to the west as the course of the day. What should you call a creeper finds its way up, and its consciousness is so, I would say, so good, in fact, that it tries to create fruits so that seeds are dropped more and more of its kind is growing, right? And the way it does it is finds its way towards the sun, gets chlorophyll, I mean, basically gets energy and grows, right? So I think the endowment of uh, this push to grow and decide and respond to environment becomes more sophisticated and more and more sophisticated. In the stone, it's there, but it's next to nothing.
Yeah.
In the
The,
vegetable, it's a little more pronounced, and then in the worm,
correct,
it's
correct.
a lot more
The,
pronounced. Yeah, go ahead, Mister.
the stone, we may say no response is also a response because Baba also used stone for even an example. You should become like a stone, you know, to the world. I mean, some references are there where he wanted us to become like stone, you know. So no response is also a response. So in that context, it that's we can take it like that. The
Correct.
stone doesn't
Perfect.
respond. So
That's also a response.
yeah,
It's a good point.
yeah.
Yes.
Not
So
responding is
All the
also
women will know, Jai Baba, all the women will know this, that no response is also a response.
yeah, yeah.
Men become partly stone like. At least once in a while, you have to become like that. Jai Baba.
So don't worry, Norm. If you, I mean, I don't want to wish you to get another birth, but if you get another birth, Baba says you'll be a man, and then you can experience non reaction. You can
I feel I must have
experience.
been a man. I must have been a man in my previous birth. I rejected being a man.
I
Jai
mean,
Baba.
only temporarily. Again, with due respect, that I hope you don't have to come back. But if you do, Baba says you'll again go through the opposite and get a man form. The form that you reject is what you're going to take.
Okay.
Anyway,
Yeah.
jokes apart, let's continue and get to fish
Jai
Uh,
Baba.
uh, wha- uh,
characteristics. Yeah,
One more point I would like to stress here is Baba and Darwin.
yeah,
Darwin thought of only the forms. Baba thought of actually
consciousness.
went to the consciousness and the flowering of this consciousness to the maximum in the human form. So that's how I contrast this science, genetics, and Baba's explanation. And what is the core of this development is not just the form but the consciousness. That's what the shift in the I understanding came from, say, genetics and development and science and all that, unto consciousness. That's how I jumped over the Jai Baba.
Super. I think well said. You're in the space of genetics, and I remember as a very young kid, this concept of Darwinian evolution was so magical and so special that I used to dream about it and liked it and associate with it very well as a young student in back in school. But I think to extend and specifically think of where Baba is different, I think it's just the core of Jigyasu, right? So when you ask the question, if you read the whole of Darwin and put another why to it, everything is a why, right? So Jigyasu only is why. So if you question why Darwinian evolution happened, Baba has the answer. But the science teaches us to think that what's presented in the book is complete. So we sometimes suppress the why, right? So Darwinian theory, when you listen to it in school as a kid, you take it to be the gospel truth and complete in itself and freestanding, which it is not. If you put the why question to it, you get to Baba's answer. But again, not many people have answered it like that. That's my reading. Yeah, let's continue to Kingdom of Fish. Characteristics of the Kingdom of Fish. The fish conscious soul identifies itself with varied species of fish and experiences the gross world as a living creature in water, a vertebrate endowed with life and sensation and voluntary motion. So now we have
Warren,
three things:
Warren.
life, sensation, and voluntary motion. No, voluntary motion was also available to the
Yes.
previous
Warm.
kingdom. Worms had it. Further, and has fins. It goes through a struggle for sustenance and survival. The fish conscious soul does not assert its existence in the gross world through an erect stand, but experiences itself as recumbent, never holding its head high and erect. And specifically, Baba says there's a turn. So the worm is prostrate but facing up. The fish is prostrate but facing down. And there's a slight indication that probably some of the species in the fish kingdom can half put their head up, somewhat put their head up. So if you look at the diagrammatic representation here, right? Uh,
Yes.
Now I just noticed something. So uh, are these species landmark species which are borderline between the two, the ones that are in the on the circle? I think I read about this somewhere in one of the Baba books. So if somebody knows what I'm talking about, we should discuss
Yes,
it.
yes.
The concept of
Dolphins for the
across
fish. Yeah,
kingdoms. What is that?
correct. Dolphins for the fish. Yeah.
So there is some word for it. There's a scientific term also that Baba has used, or it's been associated to represent that. If anybody finds it, please share. Yeah. Now, from fish, let's go to birds. Characteristics of the kingdom of birds. The bird form enriches, enlightens consciousness with new experiences, since, as a feathered vertebrate, it is capable of flying in the air and with the help of its two legs of maintaining an erect stand in the gross world. So there's a big leap. So not only is it standing up and having all the other things, which is life, sensation, and animate existence, but also has the ability to fly, which is unique to this kingdom. And also, when it is not flying, it's able to stand on two legs. So the bird is here represented as standing. I mean, able to stand erect, but not fully upright, standing erect or standing up on the ground, and ability to fly represented by the outstretched arms. Right. Now, characteristics of the kingdom of animals. The animal form brings to consciousness further expansion, since it can yield new experiences through the greater varieties existing in the kingdom of animals. Endowed with life, sensation, and power of voluntary locomotion, quadruped animals have to face a struggle for existence and survival. So all the things are repeated here. Endowed with life, sensation, power of voluntary locomotion, and have to face a struggle for existence and survival, right? And here, animals mostly, till we get to the apes, are quadruped, four-legged. They are sometimes herbivorous and sometimes carnivorous. Animal consciousness does not assert its existence in the gross world through erect or upright posture, but has a tendency to look downwards with drooping head. Apes, however, are the most evolved type of animals, and they tend to stand erect like human beings. So let's go and look at the animal. So there's a half standing pose. So the animal is here, and then you finally get to the ape here, and then finally to human. So if you see the animal here, there is a possibility like a kangaroo to be able to stand on 2 feet in some way, but mostly they are quadruped. For 90% of the species, they are quadruped, but the head is looking down. So if you look at a cow, you look at a dog, you look at most of the quadruped animals, the face, the head always looks down. So that's also mentioned by Baba. Finally, Pura, characteristics of the kingdom of human beings. In the human form, the evolving consciousness of the soul attains its full development. The process of evolution of consciousness has its terminus in the human form. Here, consciousness is full and complete. When a human being is born, it can only lie prostrate, and it continues to experience this state for a fairly long period. But it soon expresses a tendency first to sit erect and then to stand erect. The fully evolved human consciousness of the soul eventually asserts its existence in the gross world through an upright position. There is a poem by Rumi, which we will read in a minute, but we'll see the human who is now standing up, face upright, standing on two legs, hands capable of motion or whatever. Of course, Darwin, if I go back to school, talks about how one of the big things in the human is also the use of the hands, which is critical, right? The opposable thumb and flexible fingers are what made all of science and manufacturing possible, right? If you look at most animals, they don't have an opposable thumb, right? A thumb which can hold and grasp. And if you look at the fingers are not flexible even in the apes. I mean, apes are very close to humans, but let's say all other animals, the fingers are not flexible. So flexible fingers, opposable thumb gets you capabilities which were hitherto not possible in any of the subhuman forms. But that's only form. Bigger joy is in the consciousness, and we'll get to that. Before we, yeah, so let's just read the um, part here, the Rumi poem, The Ascending Soul. I died as mineral and became a plant. I died as plant and rose to animal. I died as animal and I was man. Why should I fear? When was I less by dying? Yet once more I shall die as man to soar with angels blessed, but even from angelhood I must pass on. All except God doth perish. When I have sacrificed my angel soul, I shall become what no mind ever conceived. Oh, let me not exist, for non existence proclaims in organ tones, to him we shall return, and him is God. So that's Rumi. I don't know the original. There must be the original song as well in Parsi. Yeah. Okay. Reincarnation and the impressionless equipoise of consciousness. During the course of evolution of its consciousness, the soul, Atma, while consciously identifying itself with varied, finite gross forms, was also simultaneously, though unconsciously, identifying itself with its finite subtle form and its finite mental form, which associated with the soul in compact, homogeneous, unconscious alliance throughout the entire course of evolution of consciousness, right from the first urge. I will read the whole paragraph again, slowly. During the course of evolution of its consciousness, the soul, Atma, while consciously identifying itself with varied, finite gross forms, was also simultaneously, though unconsciously, identifying itself with its finite subtle form and its finite mental form, which associated with the soul in compact, homogeneous, unconscious alliance throughout the entire course of evolution of consciousness, right from the first urge. Clear? It's basically the fact that there is an association of the subtle and mental form right from the first urge through the kingdoms. Although the soul frequently and consciously
No, till
disassociated, yeah,
till now we were concentrating only on the form. So
mhm,
this paragraph makes it very clear that simultaneously, though unconsciously, identifying itself with its finite subtle form and its finite mental form. So the development in the other two associated things is also happening in
happening.
evolution.
Very true.
Mhm.
And also, if you read the last line, it is evolution of consciousness right from the first urge.
Yes, yes.
So one is what you said, which is it's in parallel developing the subtle and the mental forms from the latency and the dormant states in the stone form to the final human consciousness where it is at max capacity. And that's what is said in the last line, where consciousness is also evolving. I continue. Although the soul frequently and consciously disassociated itself from the finite gross forms which acted as media to experience the impressions gained in the course of evolving greater and higher consciousness, The soul could never disassociate itself consciously or unconsciously, directly or indirectly, from its finite subtle form and its finite mental form. On the contrary, while the soul disassociated its identification with any one medium of finite gross form, it was the unconscious association of soul with its finite subtle form that fortified the soul, now without any gross medium, with finite energy, the driving force, to give a tendency to the consciousness of the soul towards identifying itself with the next medium of the next finite gross form in order to experience the impressions of the last dissociated finite gross form retained and reflected by the finite mental form of the soul. Whoa, lot being said, but very,
Yes,
very
yes,
interesting concept. Very, very
yes.
interesting concept. So the concept that Baba is clarifying is the why question of why should the soul go from one to the other and how. So the how is it is powered by energy, primal force, Shakti, let's say, right? And it's powered by that, and it's nurtured by the subtle body, and the storage of the the impressions are anyway in the mental body. So the how you move from one soul and the why you move from one soul is covered in this paragraph.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
Kartik, let's not forget to bring in the word consciousness, consciousness of the soul.
Yes, consciousness of the soul. Thank you. Correct.
Yeah, that has a
Yeah,
natural tendency due to the latent and dormant past impressions.
correct. Consciousness of the soul. You're right.
Mhm.
The key and that point is important for us to not lose sight of right through. Right? Let's continue.
Right.
It is but natural that together with the evolution of higher and greater consciousness of soul, the evolution of the finite subtle form of the soul also takes place to fortify the soul with greater finite energy to incline the consciousness of the more and more gross conscious soul to identify itself with higher and higher types of finite gross forms evolved by the impressions of the last lower finite gross form. Don't miss the fact that energy is preceded by the word finite energy. So, though it is primal, though it is energy that's existing in the creative universe, it is finite energy. It's not infinite energy and the power that you enjoy at God realization. This is more the finite energy, just enough to push you to the next form, to identify and push you to the next form based on the construct of impressions that exist in the mental form, mental body. Continuing, similarly, the evolution of the finite mental form of the soul also takes place simultaneously to accommodate, retain, and reflect the increasingly innumerable varied impressions gained and gathered by the evolution of greater and greater consciousness of the soul. Thus, it is that when the soul tends to identify itself with varied species of vegetable forms, the evolved finite subtle form and the evolved finite mental form of the soul begin to show greater and visible signs of the soul's association with its much evolved finite subtle form and finite mental form in the shape of varied rapid cycles of changes taking place in vegetable forms, and also in the shape of vegetables forms showing first signs of peculiar, varied, and meaningful tendencies of self preservation and survival of the fittest. So, the evolution of consciousness tends you and progresses you towards the next kingdom unconsciously, right? So you create and show signs of tendencies of self-preservation and survival of the fittest to a degree where there are plant forms which actually can the flycatcher, the Venus flycatcher, and forms that can be so smart that they can actually eat protein, eat animal protein, right? So they actually eat a fly. The plant is so smart. So that's self-preservation and survival of the fittest at the plant kingdom level. Going further, in the worm, bird, and fish forms, this tendency of the finite mental form of the soul is translated gradually and steadily into the shape of instinct until, in the animal form, this instinct is fully manifested as one of the finite aspects of the finite mental form of the soul. Gradually, this instinct is further and completely transformed into intellect, this being the highest finite aspect of manifestation of the mental form in the human form of the gross conscious human soul experiencing the gross world. So then that basic preservation tendency becomes more solid and is an instinct. And finally, that instinct transforms itself to intellect in the human form. Continuing, so it is that only in the human form are the subtle body and the mental body fully developed. Wherefore, the soul, associating itself consciously with the human form, is, so to speak, fully equipped with a human body, subtle body, and mental body, together with full consciousness of the gross. Although the soul has gained consciousness in human form and thus experiences the gross world, yet the gross conscious human soul is unconscious of the subtle body and so cannot experience the subtle world. It is also unconscious of the mental body and thus cannot experience the mental world. Even though the soul has only gross consciousness and is unconscious of the subtle and mental, it does work through the subtle and mental bodies, although indirectly on the gross plane. Even though the gross conscious human soul is unconscious of its subtle and mental bodies and their respective subtle and mental worlds, and therefore does not realize the energy of the subtle and the mind of the mental, yet it can use energy through various gross aspects of energy, such as nuclear energy, and it can use mind through various aspects of mind, such as desires, emotions, and thoughts. Of these, desires are the predominant aspect of the mind. Of this soul, now fully gross conscious of the firstmost human gross form and still unconscious of the subtle and mental experiences in the gross world, the impressions of the lastmost animal gross form disassociated or dropped. When all the impressions of the lastmost animal gross form are exhausted, it is but natural that the firstmost human gross form is disassociated from the soul. This experience of the soul is universally termed the death of the human being. As explained previously, although this soul is disassociated from the first most human gross form, it is never disassociated from its subtle or its mental forms or bodies. It was also previously explained that though this soul is disassociated from its firstmost human gross form, the soul retains and experiences through the subtle and mental bodies the impressions of the dropped or disassociated firstmost human form, and the soul again associates itself with the nextmost human form to experience the impressions of the previous human form dropped. In fact, the nextmost human form is nothing but the consolidated mold of the past impressions retained of the previous body or form that disassociated from the soul. Thus, the association of the soul with the nextmost human form is called universally the birth of a human being.
Kartik, one comment I have here.
Sure.
uh, During this evolution of human consciousness and disassociation with the previous forms that could be the immediate previous human form and the animal form that was before the human form is actually, it could get complicated sometimes because like when we see in the world when very drastic crime happens, like it's human, but or the extent of the loss among some human and so forth. I always think to myself when I like hear the news, this happened on that, how just hard to believe. Then I always tell myself that his animalistic sanskaras might be still working. He's not completely disassociated with that. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
some of the human sanskaras are persisting for a long time in human consciousness. I just wanted to share that.
You mean some of the animal impressions persist? Yeah,
Some
yeah,
of the
yeah. I
animal
think you, but
impressions persist.
yeah, for longer.
Maybe I
Yeah,
said it
yeah,
wrong.
totally
Yeah.
agree. Yeah, you said human. So anyway, I
Oh,
think
I
that's
meant
so true.
animal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's so true. That's so true. But it could also be that it's the it's the first few births of that consciousness of the soul, right? So
That's true.
hence it's exhaust. Yeah, it's just exhausting the animal sanskaras first, and the animal instincts are
That's
welling up
true.
more than everything else. So to
Yes.
Ashish's point, the more you see violence and the more you see baser instincts operating of violence, destruction, and lust, and so on, you are actually seeing more push from the animal births. I mean, animal souls coming into the human kingdom. To your larger, I mean, your earlier question, Ashish, if you're still there, yeah, you're there, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, let's continue.
Yes, yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. The apparent gap between the death and birth of a human being is that period in which the gross conscious soul, in its association with its fully developed subtle and mental bodies, has experiences of the predominant counterpart of the opposite impressions gathered by the recently dissociated human form. This state of the soul, in the apparent gap between death and birth, is generally called hell or heaven, and this process of intermittent association and disassociation of consciousness of the conscious soul in human form, now fully conscious, is termed the reincarnation process. So, two definitions. One, birth and death is nothing but reincarnation once you come to the human form. And second definition, the state in between reincarnation is the hell or heaven state. This is the two definitions in this paragraph.
And clearly it says that you are experiencing in the uh, intermediate phase the opposite of what you experience in the gross form.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So predominant counterpart of the opposite impressions.
Yeah.
But if you go to discourses, it also says that it's an intensified and vivified way of experiencing the impressions in the absence of space-time construct. So
Yeah.
there's no time for you, right? when you're dead. So the soul has the liberty, or should I say, if it's not liberty in hell, right? So has the predicament of having to experience the impressions that one experienced in the just dropped form in a more intensified form, and make probably the decisions about and the choices for the next soul. But
Yes,
remember
yes.
the last conversation last Sunday, your your mental faculties are still lost. So your academic understanding is going to remain there, and you're going to make decisions based on the consciousness of the soul, and then make progress as deserving, unless you get the grace of the perfect master, which means that you know get out of the cycle. Okay, let's continue. If the predominant counterpart of the impressions of opposites, such as virtue and vice, good and evil, male and female, etc., as experienced by the soul, now associated only with the subtle and mental, is of virtue or goodness, that is the positive aspect of the opposite impressions, then the soul is said to be in heaven. If it is of vice or evil, the negative aspect of opposite impressions, then the soul is said to be in hell. The states of heaven and hell are nothing but states of intensive experiences of the consciousness of the soul, experiencing either of the predominant counterparts of the opposite impressions, while the soul is disassociated from the gross human body or form. The soul itself does not go to heaven or hell, as is the general belief, because it is eternally infinite and eternally in the oversoul. It is the consciousness of the soul which experiences the impressions. As soon as the predominant counterpart of impressions is experienced and exhausted, and just when equilibrium is about to be maintained between the opposites of impressions of the last human form that was dropped, at this juncture, the soul automatically associates itself, associates with the next most human form, molded of the consolidated impressions of opposites, which were about to be in a state of equilibrium. Interesting concept here. So, as you tend towards equilibrium in the hell or heaven state by experiencing the opposite, predominant opposite, you actually take that form of that predominant opposite and take the next birth. Thus, the gross consciousness of the soul, after experiencing either hell or heaven, associates with the next human form, takes another birth, to experience and exhaust the residual opposite impressions of the last birth. As has already been said, this next human form of the soul is nothing but the consolidated mold of the residual opposite impressions of the last form. So, Norm, you'll become a male, and probably you'll give the silent treatment, the stone treatment to your better half, right? How are we doing on time? Yeah, we have 5 minutes. I'm continuing. It is in this manner that an apparently unending chain of births and deaths of human forms or beings continues to form and dwindle. This is the course of reincarnation in human forms of the soul after it has gained full gross consciousness through the whole series of evolution of the gross consciousness. Right from the unconscious state of the soul, comparable to the deep sleep state of man, until it has gained full gross consciousness, comparable to the wide open eyes of man in the awake state. While experiencing the gross world, the soul is capital One, indivisible, infinite, formless, and is eternally in the oversoul. Throughout the whole process of evolution, reincarnation was an absolutely spontaneous outcome of the first urge manifested in the unconscious soul to become conscious of its eternal and infinite self, biggest self. As has been mentioned already, we can now understand that the cycle of evolution of consciousness of soul evolved further and greater consciousness together with the evolution of forms of higher and higher types while exhausting the impressions of the disassociated forms of lower types. Thus, the evolution of consciousness of soul apparently causes the soul to identify itself with and gather varied, innumerable impressions of higher and higher gross species of forms of the gross world. The clean cut and major concrete gross forms, after the first seven major, most abstract, gaseous, and fluid forms, with which the consciousness of the soul associated with every leap of greater and greater consciousness, are separated by the seven leaps from stone to metal, from metal to vegetable, from vegetable to worm, from worm to fish, from fish to bird, from bird to animal, and lastly, from animal to human being. So we'll possibly pause here and continue from this point on next week. Any comments before we go? Questions? If there is none, then stop.
So it says some impressions from the last birth will remain the next birth also, right? If some
Correct.
characteristics I am following in this birth, any kind of
Yes,
characteristics, either forgetness or anything. So that might be the reasons of the previous birth.
that is from
There
the
are
previous
chances.
birth.
There are
Correct.
chances.
Correct.
Yeah, that's what.
Correct. No, but that's
Uh,
commonly acknowledged, right? So we have
Yeah,
certain unexplained gifts. We see prodigies. You see a musician who learns instantly, right? So how do you explain that? That's the
yeah.
tendency. That's the memory working. That's the past life memory working. Yeah, Mamaji, you were saying
Yeah.
something.
uh, uh, One point in the astral world, as the pendulum swings from the opposite impression, from what you experience in the gross form and what you are experiencing in the subtle or the mental uh, forms, uh, it never becomes zero. It tends to be almost becoming zero. At that point, you are having a next birth. So that means you carry impressions to the next birth, residual impressions, and gather new impressions. If you are in the gross world afterwards, gross form afterwards. So this continuous accumulation and removal of impression has to become zero for realization. Am I correct in understanding?
Verbatim, I mean, from what you're understanding, I mean, what you summarized from the last two paragraphs is correct. But I'm actually struggling with one thing which I will think and come back, and I'm happy if somebody else has an explanation for it. Uh, I believe that in each human, at the end of each human birth in the heaven or hell state, uh, I don't, you can't tend to equilibrium so easily in every birth, right? So is it a reference to just the opposite experiences, just coming to your consciousness? I don't know how to explain it, but what I'm saying is the tending towards equilibrium is a very delicate and final step. So how it happens at every birth is what I'm trying to think about. I don't know if I'm making sense.
No, it doesn't become the pendulum doesn't stop in the center, but
Okay.
it tends to be coming nearer. At that stage, you jump to the next form. Next. Otherwise, the impressions become totally zero when it
Zero.
becomes zero. That
Equilibrium.
means realization. So if there is no further impression, the consciousness is fully free of every binding.
Mm.
So that's why this is the way we have to see this is probably you are given a chance to experience what all you did in the cross form and to learn a lesson to either do better or give up certain tendencies that you had or acquired. So it's a learning process, world experience, timeless but short but intense learning process. So if the soul consciousness can pick up these ways and means of avoiding certain things, progress is fast.
In the
Agree.
heaven and hell state, Jai Baba, the main thing is like when you go between human births, you're going having a recap. Each time you come as a human form, you're working on different sanskaras. That is number one. Number two is during the reincarnation state, you are spending all the sanskaras that you have gained through the animal evolution, especially. So you have to experience those animal sanskaras in the human form till you get bored of it, till you get the tipping point where you realize that being attached to the five physical senses, which we call as the gross impressions, that needs to be dissolved. So the real spiritual journey starts only in the first stage of first plane of involution. That is, gross sanskaras have to become subtle sanskaras. You have to go beyond the five physical senses. So then the impressions, gross sanskaras become finer, subtle sanskaras, and the finer, subtle sanskaras become the finest mental sanskaras. Because the sanskaras in the mental world are weaker than in the subtle world, and the subtle sanskaras are weaker than the gross sanskaras. The gross sanskaras is where most people are stuck. As we know, there is 7,000 in the spiritual hierarchy from the first plane to the seventh plane. And I don't know whether beyond the 7,000 who are working in the spiritual hierarchy between the first and seventh plane, are there passive drop souls who have gone beyond the five physical senses? And then again, you have to go beyond the fifth and sixth plane, the domain of mind with thoughts and domain of mind with feelings. So that is another bridge to be crossed. So impressions are being obtained through the evolution state so that consciousness become full and complete. And after consciousness become full and complete in the human form, it has to spend all these sanskaras in the human form and use the human body to experience good, bad, ugly, all the different impressions. And then you go through this whole process because life is a zero sum game. You're going from 0 degrees unconscious divinity to conscious divinity at 360 degrees. So you
Yeah.
can say 0 to 180 is evolution, 180 to 270 is reincarnation, and 270 to 360 you can take those involution aspects. So that is what, and here it says in this paragraph, the most finite first impression of the first urge gave to the unconscious soul the most finite first consciousness. So I was looking which came first, whether the urge or consciousness. So the whim actually gave rise to the most finite first consciousness. So this is
Yeah.
where this whole journey starts with the most original whim or the first initial gurge of God, the Parabrahma, or when he wakes up, he becomes Paramatma. And then that's where that beams thing comes, where simultaneously and spontaneously infinite consciousness and infinite unconsciousness arises,
Yeah.
and infinite consciousness become Paramatma. It realizes itself, and infinite unconsciousness is where we all are going through this journey in the human form. Eva.
Perfect. Perfect.
Kartik, I have a comment to make. Actually,
Sure.
let's just trying not to jump ahead of all this. Um, I think, I always ask, not always, well, sometimes I ask myself, like, what is this process of evolution within, um, the lower form of the finite consciousness? For example, stone, metal, vegetable, fish, worm, like that. Uh, they do have a consciousness, gross consciousness, and subtle and mental. Okay, but it's the mechanism. It seems to me is very different than the human body and the three bodies associated with that and its consciousness. Um, so it seems to me that it's like a system, okay, that Baba has put together, God has put together a system where the evolution of consciousness in lower forms um, begin to identifying themselves with various forms, all the way from stone to animal, let's say. Now we're talking about before human. And
Mhm.
and and once they identify themselves with the form, obviously they gain impressions.
Mhm.
And once that they gain this, Baba says here, innumerable impressions, those innumerable impressions are pushing them to the higher form, because this mechanism has to repeat itself on and on and on and on. You gain an impression, then you've got to spend it, balance it out, come back, and then, on and on. So, this reincarnation is happening in lower forms too. Now, here we're focusing on lower forms and not necessarily the human. So it seems to me is a automatic mechanism, which is very highly intelligent there, where there's this process happening again and again and again. You know, uh, I repeat myself, identifying with the form, gaining innumerable impressions,
Impressions.
and pushing that kept that pushing them to the higher form of gross world and that. Okay, which is very brilliant, but my little finite mind can see it this way. Um, Also, in terms of the human consciousness, let's not forget that Baba said, for you means us that are here and know the avatar or God in human form in different advent, you must have had 8,400,000 just the human form. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And why we've had that? Perhaps because there has been numerable impressions from previous forms that may not be necessarily human, but very close to the lower forms, or very low form of human impression that caused this uh, ongoing incarnation happens. And we're still here, but we still have our lost, we still have our greed. After
Yeah.
8,400,000 is still, we're like not even halfway there. So it seems that it's pretty complicated, and it may seem simple, but it's pretty complicated. Jay Baba.
Jai Baba, but I think if you have done 840, 8,040,000, you're done. Baba says the probability, I mean, not probability, there is a arithmetical certainty for you making it because there are no more impressions. Okay. So, but your chances of doing it earlier are based on grace and based on your involution and so on and so forth. But all that you said is so true. It's the most fantastic system put in place here with all the rules and laws operating by themselves, and so much is happening, and all of this is just to go back and discover our true nature and get back in contact with the divine beloved. That's all we want to do, and that's this whole complex system is set up only to achieve that.
Yeah,
It's mind boggling.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Anyway, so on that note, we will wrap up for today and see you all next Saturday. And until then, Jai Baba.
Jay Baba and Kartik, don't forget that little meditation at the end, but we can do it from next week because now we're doing.
Yes, thank you, thank you, thank
Yeah.
you. Yes, I think yes, let's do that.
We
Let's do
just go
that from
back to
next
it
week.
again.
Yes,
Jay
yes, sure.
Baba.
Jai
Jai
Baba, Jai
Baba,
Baba,
Jai
Jay
Baba.
Jai
Baba.
Baba,
Jai
Jai
Baba.
Baba.